Thanks very much, Michael, for the introduction, and delegates for being in attendance, I guess. Michael, I think you did a great job to get here too, from what I hear. I'm not going to talk about telematics per se. I'm not going to talk about widgets and gadgets per se, but I am going to try and pick up on some of the really interesting thoughts from yesterday. The National Transport Commission, I guess publicly I'd like to, as others have, congratulate Beck for having this conference in Singapore. It gives us all a great opportunity to see what part of our future might be like in one of the cities that is no doubt a world leader in dealing with the future. And we've all, I think, appreciated that so far, and we're only just on to Tuesday. NTC, therefore, very pleased to provide sponsorship and support, both now and in the future. I'm going to try and focus on the future. I'm going to speculate what our kids and their kids will face in years to come. I'll also cover what the NTC is doing to prepare for the future, what the NTC is doing to be in a position to share with your industry and with governments appropriate thought leadership, and provide professional support as best we can. I should say here and now that the NTC is not a regulator. Our role has been to, I sometimes say, make everyone equally unhappy, but that's probably a bit negative. Our role is to base our thinking on information we gather from others, from research, not necessarily done by us at all, and to develop reforms to deal with the wishes of industry and with the issues, the wishes of government. I'm quite pleased when industry people say we are too close to government, and I'm equally pleased when jurisdictions and government people say we are too close to industry. That's where we like to be, and hopefully we do our job well. Now I'm going to use technology, so be careful. There's a green button with an arrow going forward, so look out. I can't even see what's going on, but anyway. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, that's clever, isn't it? Jeez, I didn't know that was there. In fact, there's two of them. Okay, that's pretty, I think you can read that for yourselves. So the key question I've got to answer this morning is, what is government's role in innovation? Now, just 8 years ago, none of you had a smartphone. They weren't around. And just 8 minutes ago, while I was sitting over there, I noticed just 8 minutes ago, quite a few people doing emails, quite a few people checking on their phone messages, and I suspect one person sort of up towards the back was playing Angry Birds. Might be wrong. Anyway, the point is, 8 years ago, we didn't have this. So change has a habit of sneaking up on us. 29 years ago, a long time ago, some of you possibly weren't born then, Michael Apps, I think, was still here. Location, Ballarat, Victoria. I'm a regional manager. I was a regional manager for the then Victorian Road Authority. We had a new CEO, ex-IBM. We received in Ballarat a personal computer in a box, in several boxes in those days, and we said, I wonder what we're supposed to do with this. He believed in autonomous management, and we all thought, as many of you might have thought, well, clearly, this thing sort of obviously does calculations or something, so we'll give it to the accountants, and we'll actually give it to the accounting department's typist, because it had a keyboard and none of us could type. You'll remember the days when none of us could type. Thinking back over the course of my life, I can remember the day when I was working in Traralgon, we were all rushed down to the post office to see this thing called a fax machine. And some person in Melbourne drew a diagram of some sort, and it was magically appeared out of this machine in Traralgon. Well, fax machines are dead. I don't think you could buy one as part of something else, but faxes are pretty much gone. Mobile phones, you remember they used to be the size of bricks, and they used to actually make phone calls. And now they fit on a watch, and they do pretty well everything else, but. And this is a bit of trivia which is actually nothing to do with this topic, but I just thought I'd tell you that our butcher no longer takes cash, just cards. Thankfully he still sells meat. My wife Sue, who's sitting over there, and Sue and I have 6 personal computing devices between us. Our 2 children, who are now in their early 40s, still say that we are technical conservatives. They get really annoyed when you say, well, you know, you're in the X generation. They say, no, we're really in the Y generation, but we've told them they're nearly middle-aged and they can't handle that. Anyway, so in the information age, technological change doesn't move in a linear fashion. It jumps in fits and starts, and we've heard about some of those jumps yesterday and this morning. Previously stable areas become quite disturbed, and I'll talk about that later. I've seen this in different ways across Australia's transport network, as you have. Multiple different ticketing systems. Some you could scratch and smell, some you could just read about how much they cost. And they're getting replaced. They're almost obsolete the day that they get switched on. There's new ways of communicating, we know that. Real-time arrival and departure data is common. People can check the traffic conditions on their preferred routes on their tablet, their phone or whatever, while having breakfasts. I remember the days when people said, who's going to go into another room, turn on a computer and find out, you know, how to get to work? Well, you don't have to anymore because we've all got something that will tell us. Uber is shaking up the taxi industry, and I and others perhaps attended the biannual meeting of Transport Ministers in Adelaide last Friday, and there's no doubt Uber has caught ministers, I won't say with their pants down because it's rude, but they admit we've all been caught out by Uber. I think Uber's going to shake up a lot of your industry as well. But more things will need to change because ultimately transport consumers don't like sitting in traffic or being delayed at bus stops or train stations for any reason. They prefer to spend time with family, friends, etc. As we heard from New Zealand and others yesterday, the next younger generation relies almost fully on technology to find destinations. They don't know what a map is unless it's touch screen. It's more concerned about the environment than any generation in the past. That doesn't mean that they will all take to public transport. Occasionally I am privileged to actually share a drink with some of my son's friends in a bar in the city. You know, it's sort of a very cool thing for fathers to do, particularly if you're invited. Now just recently one of his friends said to me, public transport is for the public, and I don't have time to wait for them. Now, you reckon that's snobbish, arrogant? Probably. Truthful? Probably. Or honest? Who knows, but I bet he's not alone. This consumer demand for transport reform means Australia's regulatory and compliance regime will have to keep pace. I'll show you where it's at in a minute. Just as companies and governments have had to change their communications, learn to deal with emails, Facebook, Twitter and the like. Right now, I'd have to tell you, in Australia, every time someone invents a new type of mobility device, Australia's road rules have to be changed. That is not easy with 9 governments to help. That approach is not going to cut it in the future. We cannot keep catching up. So how are consumers going to get things like fully autonomous cars if people in government think that they've got to approve every make, every specification and every software update? That's a picture of a desk. That is a picture of a blue box which you might have bought copy paper in. There are 5 reams of paper in there. There's 2,500 sheets. That pile of paper on the right-hand side came out of 3 trucks that were being replaced. That pile of paper, or a third of it, represents the current permits and the documentation that has to be carried by each of those trucks to deal with current regulations. When I show that to some of the trucking industry, they say, well, clearly if we didn't have to carry all that stuff, we wouldn't be overloaded. So at the moment, the general approach used in road transport is very prescriptive, like that. That is a disgrace in my view, and I suppose I was part of it, so I can say that. It is not performance-based. It's guesswork-based, some of it. But there are performance-based approaches, and they work pretty well, to varying degrees. These include performance-based standards, where we moved away from what a vehicle looked like to how it actually performed. Some of the newer Australian design rules are about performance. The occupant protection one is one that was done some years ago, where it wasn't about how big the airbags had to be. It was what injuries had to be avoided in a certain crash. Chain of responsibility is something you're all aware of, and even last Friday ministers moved it even further from prescription towards sort of safe systems approaches. The national rail safety laws are already performance-based. They're a good example of what can work. So is maritime, so is aviation. So it's not outlandish to think that road transport could also move to performance-based laws. So I'm talking about a safety management system. You'll know the jargon, you might not like what it means, but it is a way of ensuring high levels of safety are maintained without the government telling everyone how to do it, or at least not telling them exactly how to do it, let's be honest. Rail operators, both track owners, and in the jargon they're called below rail operators, and train operators, and guess what, they're called above rail operators, now you're getting it. They have to be accredited by the National Rail Safety Regulator. These rail operators develop their accreditation proposals that outlines the way they're going to manage safety risks. The rail laws take then a performance-based approach to setting out the requirements of the accreditation, although I'll admit there's still some prescriptive elements in the law. So the rail operator submits this sort of accreditation proposal, and it obviously gets a tick or a flick. What's really interesting, and I haven't been able to lug them here today, but the size of the national rail laws compared to the road laws, quite a lot smaller. Looking into the future, okay, why do we need to move down to the safety management system? It is all about being very difficult to predict the future. I've tried with a sort of crystal ball, which is one of the 7 bits of technology that my wife and I use when the others fail. Back in 1899, the French looked at what the year 2000 might look like, and this drawing is from a book of drawings about the future of transport. If you can't quite work it out, it is a whale. It's underwater, and suspended from underneath it is a bus. Don't know how many of you got underwater buses. At the front is a driver. I'm not sure what the driver is doing, but interestingly, I love the picture because at the back on top there, if you could see it clearly, there's a little guy in a diver's helmet with a big paddle steering. And then there's someone in the middle on the roof with some reins. Now, yeah, there's a lot of nonsense in that, but there's also a lot of... in 1899, when the motor vehicle wasn't even around much, there's a lot of forward thinking. I don't think we'll see whale buses, but I'm going to try and imagine what it might be like in 2070. That's a hell of a long way ahead. But let's have a look at it and see, let's imagine that if all of Australia's transport was governed by safety management systems and not piles of paper that I showed you before, let's think what that might be like. And then let's drag ourselves back to maybe 8 years from now. Clearly, operators would have much more responsibility and flexibility. Instead of spelling out everything that a transport company must do, down to the type of widgets you have to buy, you'll be asked to place policies and procedures, put them in place, develop to suit your own business. It will require rigorous hazard identification as it does now, and risk mitigation, safety investigations and audits, and appropriate monitoring by you, but it also includes back office auditing of the systems you produce. It means, Sal, no roadside enforcement at all. I think that's where we could be heading. Imagine a world where police agencies could do other things like catching crooks. I suppose I can say that, because that implies that people who get caught now aren't crooks. Yeah, that'll do. Imagine a world where police don't have to check the sort of tyres you've got on your vehicle, or whether your headlights are working okay. Let's also imagine in 2070 that only automated vehicles are using the roads. Automated vehicles are very close. There are trials, as you heard yesterday. Goodness knows in a few years' time, I think they will be around. Automated vehicles carry only passengers or freight. There'll be some vehicles with one passenger, but no driver. There'll be some vehicles like automated buses, which will exist, and they'll carry many people, obviously. But get this, there could be vehicles with no one in them at all. Why, you say? Well, I sort of wonder myself, but automated vehicles could drop a person off at the nearest public transport hub, station, bus station or whatever, could return on their own to pick up the kids and take them to school. I mean, could do. In 2070, probably will do. That's if we have schools. There'll be no steering wheels. Nobody needs a driver's licence. Peter Duncan, bad luck, pal. Do something else. Mainly because there's no drivers, that's a bit I could understand. Now, under this hypothetical scenario, how will government regulations work? Let's say Australia's road transport regulations have been completely overhauled to become performance-based safety management systems, similar to rail safety, as I mentioned. The automated vehicle manufacturers are the above road operators. They are required to put a safety management system in place and give it to Sal, or Sal's grandchildren. The National Road Regulator will only have about 100 licence holders. They'll all be manufacturers. And they'll have approved management systems. The systems will deal with speed, with vehicle maintenance, with network access, that the above road operators need to manage in their safety management systems. There are also reporting requirements on these manufacturers, if you like. So if anything goes wrong, they will be expected to fix it. The National Road Regulator also has 8, unfortunately I think, in a way, because Sal gets worried about this, also has 8 below rail operators. They of course are the states and territory, the road managers. They have the same role as the below rail operators do at the moment, in that they're responsible for asset management, maintenance and upgrades of infrastructure and managing access to the network. Local government, by far the majority of road managers, decided some years ago, I'm in 2070, right, so future still, that their access requirements would fit into the safety management systems of the states, but they still have active input into those systems. In 2070, some of the long-standing players in the industry will remember the bad old days when heavy vehicles used to be hard for local governments to manage. Now automated vehicles will manage themselves. They'll have mass distance, location, measurement capability. The below rail operator has set the network access maps with different levels of access. The vehicles won't go where they can't go. Traditionally, registration by road managers disappeared some time back. There are no fuel-based charges. John Stanley's wish came true. The above road operators pay for the consumption of the road directly to the road managers and local governments, doesn't go anywhere else. There have been benefits to road managers, to governments and the community. Traffic lights and traffic signals have disappeared. Anyone going back through Melbourne, have a look at the very crude technology used on the bag handling carousels. In Melbourne you'll have plenty of time to watch it, I think, anyway. From other states you don't understand just how well our baggage system works. Insurance premiums have dropped fast. No one has seen those sort of road safety ads for so long because they can't do anything about it anyway. Okay, we're not back to the future just yet. Do you remember the Back to the Future films? Back to the Future 2 was actually Forward to the Future, and the characters flew around in a car, the driverless car without any wheels. Now that film, the future bit of that film, was set just 21 days ago from today, so it was back in October 2015. We're practically no closer to a flying car than we were then. So what I'm saying is that we can all predict the future. Some of it we'll get right, some of it we won't. So what? Let me have a look a little bit closer to home. What I've said was possibly a bit far-fetched for you to imagine, and I'd say the only one of us who's going to be here in 2070 doing what they're doing now is probably Michael Apps. So let's think about a more realistic time period. Let's think 8 years ahead. Typical bus operator gets out of bed, and I'm going to call him Wayne, okay? Just in case you know one. Puts the kettle on, reaches for his smart tablet. Map on the screen shows him that all buses are running on time and there are enough operational buses in the depot to fulfil the schedule. No delays, no cancellations. Perfect, Wayne, well done. This is great news because he's just signed a new 5-year bus service contract with the state government that gives it access to GPS data, providing evidence every quarter that routes were completed and that service levels were reached. Wayne heads to work. That's his work in the picture there. That's not Wayne. There's unexpected congestion ahead on his way, a breakdown. The Bus Industry Confederation's members have recently agreed to use an app to alert every bus driver of any traffic problems. But more than that, They've made the app available to the rest of us, to the rest of the driving community, presumably at a price, Michael. They've realised that getting access to traffic information from bus drivers is useful. The rest of us have realised that. And interestingly, there is now more information coming from non-bus drivers because that's the way that next generation likes to do it. Wayne logs the breakdown into the app, knowing that the 471 from Williamstown will be through in about 9.47 minutes. And he looks out the window, he sees a mum in a car, not a driverless car, also stuck in traffic, and she is pounding things into some sort of app to add to the data that's available. On the highway, flexible priority lanes are in operation, allowing buses to use dedicated lanes for their trip, giving them significant signalling priority. Finally, at work, Wayne's computer tells him he needs to talk to his drivers. These guys have been pretty heavy on the brakes, and the brakes are wearing out too fast. The onboard telematics systems have already notified the maintenance teams that a service will be needed ahead of schedule. But breaking the news to the drivers is best left to Wayne and his personal skills that we've all come to know and love. So the first meeting of the day is not necessarily about that. It's an update from his technology manager, who I've called Michael. This is about their latest business venture. It's an offshoot that runs minibuses on entirely flexible routes. It was referred to yesterday. Picking up passengers who have installed the BIC app. But this isn't just Uber for buses. BIC has figured out that an ageing population with special mobility needs requires minibuses with wheelchair lifts. They're now not servicing a limited geographic area or route. They're servicing a niche demographic market. The new business is booming, taking oldies from their doorsteps to their favourite shop and back, etc., etc. No timetables, no routes, no fuss. Real-time customer service data shows the nanas are happy too. Customers can now rate each trip taken on any bus service across Australia. Someone said of Uber that within an hour of getting bad service, 500,000 people will know about it. So customers will comment on the standard of the service and rate the driver. So Wayne sums up the weekly satisfaction data and fires it off to the state government, helping to shore up his chances of winning another contract. He also logs a reminder to present this month's highest rated driver, and I called her Julia for some reason, with a customer service award. The drivers are also going to be rating passengers, particularly those who are picking up on this sort of ad hoc basis. Across Australia, passengers who engage in polite conversation get full marks, drunken louts get marked accordingly, and drivers will eventually avoid picking them up at their houses or wherever. Most people in this room will be familiar with all of these technologies. They all exist now. Some of you have already implemented parts of those, as I understand it, and there may be some people here who have implemented all of those things. In 8 years' time, most of this, I think, will be the norm. And I would hope that your industry takes the lead and doesn't allow others to encroach on what you do really well. More of that later. Someone said change before you have to. I've already said that the ministers have admitted that they've been caught out by Uber. They're fairly determined not to be caught out again. I've got a message for all of us, and that's to government agencies like ours and to anyone else listening. And I think it's about taking time now to think, to imagine, to discuss, to share and to prepare, most importantly. Only those organisations, in my opinion, that are ready for 2024, 8 years from now, will be able to enjoy whatever the benefits might be in 2070. In other words, it's urgent, we need all of us to start getting the future in our heads somehow. The NTC, we're thinking more about the long-term challenges and opportunities that Australia is likely to face, particularly from the rapid development of intelligent transport systems. We're thinking more strategically as well as doing our other business as usual. We need to be ready to champion national reforms, but they won't be just ours, they'll be ones that we all have a share in. So to do this, we're forming stronger, first thing we're doing is forming very strong relationships with other countries, like Singapore, other countries that find themselves dealing with similar issues and, like us, are looking into the future to try and figure out how to be flexible enough to deal with it. NTC officials are providing close input into the organising committee for the Automated Vehicle Symposium 2016 in San Francisco. That's next year, obviously. NTC officials have recently represented Australia in the International Task Force for Vehicle Highway Automation, the ITS World Congress in France earlier this year. And we periodically organise teleconferences with the US Department of Transport and other US agencies to try and keep up to date with what's happening in the Americas. And we've got a memorandum of cooperation with the US Federal Highway Administration to share data and knowledge on a virtually regular, continual basis. We've established pretty strong links and communication channels with the UK Department of Transport and the UK Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. We need to see this as a worldwide issue. Australia just is way too small to try and do it on its own. Just a few other things quickly. Last Friday I said ministers met and they actually approved a project that will determine what regulatory barriers have to be removed to enable us to all enjoy this future. That project started on Monday, yesterday. It is urgent. We'll be looking at both the short-term regulatory barriers and that are preventing trials of autonomous vehicles, and some states that are doing those trials, such as South Australia, are also even more urgently looking at how they can allow those things to occur. Clearly this will mean we will all have to work together to make sure we don't end up again with 9 different ways of doing things. This slide just shows you a very sort of summary version of who's doing what. I've said one of the things we're doing, apart from finding out what all the other people in the world are doing, is to look forward and see what regulations need to be basically changed or wiped out. Austroads, of which Peter Duncan is chair, is also looking at a number of more operational, technical things, including how you deal with safety, road infrastructure, and registration and licensing issues for the future. Several state transport departments are working on trials, as you know. Many other projects as well, private industry, government research organisations, ARRB. So this makes us all working together absolutely crucial, because you can see chaos coming if we don't. To this end, we're absolutely committed to continue to work with your organisations and with many others and with governments to try and avoid any possible chaos. We also wanted to discuss what other views there are around these issues. We want to help ensure that Australia can fully capitalise on transport technologies like cooperative intelligent transport systems, etc., etc. We have to be looking further ahead. Because if we don't, we're going to miss the possibilities and we're going to end up with inflexible systems like we have now. To some extent we've been caught out by Uber. I think that's probably been a good thing, a good wake-up call. And it's clear that governments are not quite sure how to handle it at the moment, although I will say the ACT has recently introduced a method by which Uber can become legal. So we've got an important role in continuing to do what we hope we do well. We need to make our regulations far more efficient. We do not want any more piles of paper on the desk like I showed you before. Flexible and adaptive regulation is needed, otherwise we won't encourage innovation. There's parts of the heavy vehicle industry that will not go near technology at the moment because they believe that it's just there to catch them out. Great shame, and we've got to change it somehow or other. We'll be hosting discussions with private public sector representatives to help educate ourselves and develop some common ground, and we'll be hosting conversations with ministers. All of that's critical, as I've said several times, to help us shape the future. And one thing's for absolute certain, our country is in transport is facing the need for a major cultural change. So I guess to answer the question, can government agencies help the bus industry use technology to improve safety, compliance and productivity? The answer is yes, but only if we all work together and share. It's time to finish, voice. And to do that, I just want to pose some questions. I don't think I'll read them out, but I'd really hope you can read them because some of them are going to be very important. I guess the other question that's not on that slide is for you. Is your industry going to be into moving buses, or is it going to be in moving people? Thanks for your time, and happy to answer questions when I have a drink.
I might get you to stay there if you like and field some questions if there's any questions from the floor. I've got one quick one, and I think everyone wanted to ask this one. Having Back to the Future on there, and given that you've got a crystal ball at home, I'm just wondering when I'm going to get my hoverboard.
Well now, personally, I don't think hoverboards would be good for you. You obviously watched the film too. Yeah. Thank God. Let's not have any hoverboards, but you never know. Might be a hover bus.
Got any questions? All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.